where do you find these just crazy characters that you end up bringing on the show?
The whole thing started with like doing documentaries and kind of doing like run and gun style shoots. We just filmed like these crazy people we couldn't even imagine existed and putting it on YouTube. With some of the best content I've ever worked on, it's all stuff that gives me just like this burning feeling in my stomach that I know like people are going to be mad.
Same.
Yeah. You have a 2-3 hour shot to basically get as much out of somebody as you possibly can. And then you have to actually, at the same time, you have to be able to communicate well. I just wanted to make it like freakazoids, you know, like weird people, like I'd find under rocks, like crazy, wacky people. Actually, I have a guy coming on is the first guest that I'm going to have that I won't be able to publish it on YouTube because I'll definitely get my channel deleted.
Who's the person?
So,
all right, guys, bang, bang. I've got Danny here with me. You have one of the wildest podcasts, I think, that I've seen in a long time. You go and you find people who no one knows, who are kind of on the fringes of society, and you try to bring them to the mainstream. I think it's one of your main focuses with your podcast. Talk a little bit about where do you find these just crazy characters that you end up bringing on the show?
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Well, usually I find some of the whole thing started with like doing documentaries and kind of doing like run and gun style shoots and mini docs. One of my most popular little mini documentaries is called Deckhands. And basically we found a couple guys that were drinking Natty Lights behind a 7-Eleven in a local town near me called Madeira Beach. And the guy ended up like taking us to his boat and showing us his porn collection and like blasting Marilyn Manson at obscene volumes, like so the whole neighborhood could hear. And
normal.
We just filmed like these crazy people that we couldn't even imagine existed and putting it on YouTube. And now I'm trying to like I've tried to take that same concept and into a podcast format where I just find random crazy people, or now I hear about them or they email me and I just bring them on and talk to them.
Like, what is the bar for like crazy enough or interesting enough? Is there some way, or is it just like whatever you're personally interested in?
Just whatever I'm personally interested in, yeah.
Yeah. And as you have found these individuals, are there common themes? Like you've literally had everyone from a CIA whistleblower to the Sinaloa cartel, like analysis. It just seems like they're all fringe, they're all weird, but what's the common kind of thread through all of this?
There really is no common thread through all of it, honestly. I just kind of like lately it's just been getting introduced to people or learning about people through like my audience now, because I can only do so much myself. I can only go out and seek out as many people, so many people. Now I rely a lot on people in my audience, people emailing me, you know, calling me and saying, hey, look into this guy might be cool. And then taking a chance and learning shit, you know what I mean? Yeah. Having people that I would never be interested in otherwise.
Is there anybody who has either reached out or somebody's told you like, hey, go check this person out, they're just too crazy? You're just like, I just can't do it.
No. Recently, actually, I have a guy coming on who's going to is the first guest that I'm going to have that I won't be able to publish it on YouTube because I'll definitely get my channel deleted.
Who's the person?
So, there's a documentary made about him called Mr. Death.
Okay.
He was raised in a town in like the Midwest, and basically what happened to him is he got contracted by all the prisons to develop the execution tactic. So like he developed the electric chair. He reinvented the electric chair to make it so it actually worked and they didn't have to like electrocute people 10 times before they actually died. He actually redeveloped the gallows, the gas chambers, all the means of execution in prisons in the U.S. like since the 60s. And really weird, interesting guy. But the part about him that sucks is that I can't put him on YouTube or anything because he doesn't believe the Holocaust is real. Like he's like, he will die on that thing. He's like, I don't think it was real. He literally went to like, he went to Germany and visited all these places and did studies on it. And he's
very convinced.
Very controversial and convinced and set in his ways. And that's just a conversation that you got to keep off of social media.
Do you think about Susan and the YouTube team and like what they allow on the platform, what they don't? Or do you just
because I know shit's going to be good. I know the best, like with some of the best content, the best documentaries and best projects I've ever worked on, it's all stuff that gives me just like this burning feeling in my stomach that I know like people are going to be mad. People are going to be pissed off.
Same.
Yeah.
you know, but it's also part of it feels like I have to learn. I want to talk to that person.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had Andrew Tate on, and the video is up for a month,
Mm-hmm.
million plus views, and randomly just gets taken down one day.
Oh, it got taken down.
So I reach out to YouTube, right? And of course, they give you no real answers, whatever. And then eventually, the person we work with at YouTube, they start telling us, hey, there's more, whatever, all the way to come back and they're like the timestamps on the video. And they're like, hey, this is why it gets taken down.
Mm.
And obviously, we disagree. They don't, whatever. And so you can choose to like fight it or just say, hey, whatever, we're going to move on. And what you find through all of that process is like, the number one question I got from people after we released the episode? What was he like in person?
Really?
All these people had opinions about a guy, but no one had ever met him. No one had ever talked to him. So all the people on the internet who were saying like, I like him, I don't like him, this, that, whatever, they never talked to him.
Yeah.
And so it was fascinating to me because people who, and like folks that you wouldn't think cared about that stuff, whether they were really successful investors, entrepreneurs, people in the business world, whatever, they wanted to know. I see him in the headlines. I see this, whatever. Like, what was he like in person? And I think that goes back to this whole idea of like, that it's some people are going to be mad, but like to some degree, you have to talk to them. Like, how are you going to learn without talking to them, right?
Right. Yeah. And see like how their mind works and actually sitting down with somebody in person is so much different than like getting a perspective through the internet, through like the lens of the internet or all the clips that are on social media. I feel like I didn't know the first thing about Andrew Tate before this whole thing went crazy. Like I didn't know. I had to go watch a couple of videos to figure out what he was all about. And it seems like he has a legit like a cult following.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people, I think, on the internet that are like this, where you can judge them in long form. You can judge them by 20-second clips or whatever. But you can take the same person, and depending on how it's packaged and presented, you get completely different views of people. Like, you ever seen the? I think it's I'm going to mess it up because I know nothing about the royal family. But is it Prince Harry or Prince William or whatever the guys? And there's this thing on a photo that always goes viral on Twitter and Instagram, and he is basically looks like he's flicking off like a crowd. But then they have a second photo, and what he's really doing is he has like 3 fingers up, but from the side view, it looks like he's flicking them off.
Interesting.
And so they're always like, hey, be careful what you see on the internet. Like the photos could be misleading, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I always think of that specific image as like, from the side, it looks like he's pissed. He's flicking off the flicking off the crowd, all this stuff. And then you turn around and look at him straight on. And you're like,
yeah, that's a weird thing, right? That's a weird thing, especially with not even the internet, just celebrities too. Like people will be so infatuated with certain people or certain celebrities online, and when they meet them in real life, it's kind of like a letdown.
Yeah,
like these people are false prophets. They're really just really
humans.
good at one thing. Yeah, they're really just humans that are really good at one thing or really good at like being loud about certain things. And yeah, it's weird.
When you talk to somebody like you talk to somebody about the Sinaloa cartel,
yeah,
and that's a topic that most people in America have no clue about. They don't think about, whatever. Like, walk me through how you think about learning about a topic like that before the interview.
To be honest, I just watch a couple documentaries about something before, like for the guy who came in for the Sinaloa cartel. I've always been super interested in that subject, like reading. I don't really read books, but I actually have read a book I read a book that was written by Pablo Escobar's brother. He was like the accountant for the Medellin cartel. And that kind of got me interested in a long time ago. And ever since, I mean, everybody watches drug cartel documentaries for the most part, right? So you've seen stuff like that.
Netflix keeps producing them, so somebody's watching.
For real. And there's always stuff in the headlines regarding that. And I didn't realize, like, the way it worked. Like, so when I did that recent documentary with Luis Chaparro, he lives in Mexico and he reports on the Sinaloa cartel and all the things that go on in the Sinaloa cartel. I had like a broad understanding of what it was. A friend of mine just recommended him to me. And when the guy came in, I learned so much about it. Like, this is how it usually works. Like, when these people come in and I talk to them, like, I learned so much about that topic. I want to like immediately bring them back and talk to them again because I've learned so much from that first interaction with them.
Do you think of it as an interview or is it a documentary?
I think of them as documentaries for sure. Like, I think of each, like, I talked to you before we started. I used to only do documentaries and like television content. And when I started doing the podcast, I think of it as a documentary without the editing and without the music and without the B-roll.
And what is easier and harder about the interview versus just a traditional documentary?
The interview is way harder because you have to be good at talking. You have to be intelligent. You have to be knowledgeable. When you're doing a documentary, you're off camera. You can go back and meet up with this person as many times. Like I can go meet up with somebody, talk to them for an hour on camera, come back, edit it, figure out what's good and where I want to go from there, meet up with them again, shoot again, go interview other people, give it context. With this, it's kind of like one shot, but you have a successful podcast. You have a 2-3 hour shot to basically get as much out of somebody as you possibly can. And then you have to actually at the same time, you have to be able to communicate well. Like that's something I still suck at is communication. So like being able to play this ping pong match of a podcast and actually draw the right stuff out of somebody is such a unique talent that, I'm trying to get better at, but a lot of people are naturally good at it. Like you're naturally good at it. Like Julian, trying to fire, he's amazing at it. But I think like this talent that you develop by doing this art form translates to so many different aspects of life.
Like what?
Like just anything, like building relationships. Like if you're in business and you want to get new clients, if you want to make people like you, if you want to, everything, just communicating with humans is, I think, one of the most important aspects of life. Right?
Yeah.
That's what makes life better and more enriching.
Yeah. It's also interesting that you said you don't read books, but you do quite a bit watching documentaries, and then you obviously talk to people as well. What is the books are just boring or?
I listen to audiobooks. I'm just a slow reader. I'm not very smart. I dropped out of college like first year. So I don't know, like sitting down and turning pages to me is not something I have 2 kids. So that kind of like gets in the way, but like traveling here, I can listen to an audiobook or, driving anywhere or at the gym or something like that. It's easier to listen to podcasts and audiobooks for me.
Yeah. So that's what I did for the last 4 or 5 years was I don't think I read a book. I think I listened to them all on audiobook and then obviously a lot of podcasts. And about 4 months ago, I sat down, somebody gave me a physical book and I was like, oh, this looks interesting. And I sat down to read it and my head hurt. I couldn't read it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is not good. And like, I was like scared to tell anyone because I was like, oh my God, like my brain doesn't work. I'm literally a moron. I can't read a book. But what I realized was it wasn't reading. Hopefully I know how to read. It was more so the concentration.
Yeah.
And so I started looking online. I'm like, why is this happening? And one of the things that I realized is like when you read a book, it is something that doesn't have the LED screen behind it. And what has happened to many of our minds and eyes and things like that is we never look at distance. If you're inside all day long and you just have a screen and it's 2 feet, 3 feet away from your face,
right?
How far do you look? Maybe you turn to like your colleague and you look 10 feet away, but you never have to look 50 feet out in front of you for the most part. And so your eyes aren't used to depth, kind of going back and forth, and it's not used to looking at things other than an LED screen for long periods of time. And so it tricks your brain into like not being able to do it. And so then I just ordered a bunch of physical books and was like, I'm not going to fucking lose the ability to like look at a physical book. So for 4 months, that's pretty much all I've done. Done no audio, or actually not sure. I listened to one book on audio when I was running and things like that. But yeah, just been reading physical books. And like now I feel like a machine, but I'm not nearly as fast as listening on 1.5 speed on audio. And so I'm scared to go back because I'm like, I built up this muscle memory, but if I go back to audiobooks, what happens?
Do you think you retain information better when you read it with your eyes versus listening to it?
100 times better.
Really?
Yeah.
I've heard it makes you speak and articulate better too.
That wouldn't surprise me. I don't know for sure, but like I definitely retain the information better because like you listen to an audiobook and like maybe your mind wanders a little bit and you're like, oh, I'm listening to the book. But maybe it's like 80% retention reading and it's like 65% with audiobook or 70%. It's not that big of a difference, but it's definitely, especially around like specific data points or numbers, something like that. But the other thing is that you can't be doing anything else.
Right.
So like with an audiobook, you can drive, you can be at the gym, whatever. Like you have so much more opportunity to consume audio in your day than sit down with a book and like, this is all I'm going to do.
Right.
And so like people who just sit and read all day, like I'm jealous of them because like that sounds like a pretty cool life. But at the same time, like you can't do anything else. I don't know how they're productive.
Right. When do you find time to do it?
I schedule it.
You do. You have to be pretty disciplined to do that, right?
Yeah. Like now, especially at night, like I'm like, all right, at this point, I'm going to sit down with this book and I'm not getting up for an hour and a half. And then, I get mad at myself. I like start playing on my phone or whatever. Like you just realize like, we're addicted.
Yeah.
Like we are 100% addicted.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard, man. I mean, I have a Kindle. I read a book on my Kindle like earlier this year, but I mean, as far as like a page turning book, like the physical one, that's beyond
I'm telling you,
realm.
if you try to do it and you can't do it, it's like a mind fuck. You're like, oh my God, I have like tricked my brain into this dopamine like machine where I cannot stare at just a piece of paper.
Yeah. That's got to be super good for you to sit down and actually read a book and find that. It's got to be so good for just like discipline too, to be able to carve out an hour of your day and just sit there in the quiet. Do you have kids?
Yeah, I have a 10-month-old daughter.
Okay.
But
so
she sleeps a lot. And
does she? Okay, you're lucky. My kids don't sleep.
How old are they?
I have a 3-year-old and a 2-week-old.
Oh, a 2-week-old.
Yeah.
There's no sleeping going on there.
No, none.
When you think of a lot of the guests that you've brought in, so if you look at like somebody like the CIA whistleblower, right? How do you structure what to learn from them? Like there's so many different things that somebody like the CIA whistleblower that is it just whatever you're interested in, you start asking questions and 3 hours later you stop? Or do you go into it with a plan as to what you're going to talk about?
No, are you talking about John Kiriakou?
Yeah.
Yeah. So with him, I had sort of a rough idea of what I wanted to talk to him about. Like I had a couple rough topics built out in my mind from the couple documentaries or videos that I had watched beforehand. So I had an idea of who he was, what he had done, and what I was interested in before. Like I did a little bit of research on him, obviously. But like as far as like a structured framework, details of every single talking point I wanted to hit, no, not at all. Just kind of like let it flow.
Do you let them edit afterwards? Like it's pre-recorded if they say to you like, hey, can we take this out?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. If they ever say like, I want to cut that out, or sometimes they'd have like bathroom breaks in the middle, we'll cut it out. It's not a big deal. But typically like 99% of them, we don't edit at all. Yeah.
That's how we are as well. And we joke that the people who always ask for something edited are the ones who like, dude, nobody cares.
It rarely happens. It rarely happens.
Right. Like nobody cares about that one offhand comment, but like to them, it really matters. Like, sure, dude. Sure.
I want to kind of get away from, I don't know how I got pigeonholed into like doing I've had a few CIA people on the show, and I just recently had an FBI person on the show. I don't know how I went down that branch, but
do they recommend each other?
I want to get away from it. Yeah. No, some of them do, but usually it's like the audience will be like, yo, get this guy on. He'll be really good. And it usually does really good. Like if you look at the metrics and views and everything, like, yeah, it works good, but I'm not super like into that. That's not like what I wanted to do when I started the podcast.
What did you want to do?
I just wanted to make it like freakazoids, like weird people, like I'd find under rocks, like crazy, wacky people, not like.
Is that the pitch? It's like, yo, you're a freakazoid, come on my podcast.
For real. But I mean, no, I never imagined it would go
when
in
you
that direction.
Think of all of the people that you've interviewed. How many episodes have you done now?
100 and I've done I'm on like 155, I think.
Okay. Who is the one that stands out in your mind as like the absolute craziest person you've talked to? Is it the deckhands?
Yeah, they weren't podcasts, though. They were documentary. Those were 100% the craziest people I ever talked to.
Yeah. All right. What about on the podcast form?
I don't know. I've been asked this question, I feel like so many times. I really don't know.
You don't have one that stands out?
No, I mean, one of my favorite episodes was with, he was just an author. He was Tom O'Neill, the guy who wrote the Charles Manson book. He had some crazy stories. His story was fascinating.
Charles Manson is one of those people that I think a lot of folks around our age have heard of, but they actually don't know the story. There's a book called Cults, like Cults. Long story as to how this ended up in my possession. But I was reading it, and the first 50 pages is the Charles Manson story.
Oh, really?
Fucking wacky, man. Wacky shit. Like, I'm not going to go kill people, but like I'm going to order people to go kill people, and they're in my cult, and so they listen, and like it's just fucking crazy. And I think there's a whole generation of people who were like right after the generation that was like their thing that they lived through that we don't. Could you imagine? Like, if we were, I don't know, in our early 20s and there was like a serial killer doing stuff like that?
No, it's weird too. Like his story, I don't know if you're familiar with Tom's book, Chaos, but basically he ended up doing like a 20-year study, deep dive on Charles Manson. He wasn't even interested in it, but he was working for he was a reporter for a magazine, and he got the assignment to basically just write an article about like the 10-year anniversary of the Tate LaBianca murders. And he eventually got a little bit, entrenched in the story, and he kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And basically Charles Manson was like a 2-bit criminal, stealing cars and robbing grocery stores and stuff like that.
Dude, at like a young age.
Yeah,
like
very
at 12 was stealing cars and driving like across the country.
Right. Driving across state lines, which made it a federal crime. But he had a really fucked up childhood too. Yeah. Like a really fucked up childhood.
Kept getting moved between like orphanages and foster care.
Yeah.
And then he was like basically a professional criminal because he just kept learning from other people.
Right.
Like all the different crimes to commit.
And then like Tom eventually talked to a bunch of his probation officers, and he found out that he kept getting let out of prison. He kept getting let out and let out and let out, and he kept talking to these people, and it makes no sense how he kept getting out of jail after he had been in so many times for so many different crimes. And then
but like at some point society has to say like, can we really keep the 15-year-old? Right?
Yeah.
Like maybe we should. Maybe we should. I don't know what the answer is, but like I got to imagine that the age, if you're like a young teenager, someone somewhere is like, I feel bad for the 14-year-old who got arrested, and we got to let him out.
You think maybe they just thought he was unmanageable, so they let him out?
No, it's like imagine today, like you can just Twitter, something goes viral and it's like 12-year-old locked up for stealing a car.
Yeah.
And the mob would show up and be like, let him out. Right.
Okay.
And they'd be like, you can't treat 12-year-olds like this. That's inhumane. Like all this stuff. Now, they didn't have social media and stuff back then, but like it's the same sentiment of if you just look at the one event, then like, it's a 12-year-old. Everyone does dumb stuff as 12 years old. Like, yeah, sure, I didn't steal cars and like drive across state lines and stuff, but like every 12-year-old did something dumb. But then when you look at the totality of it, right? And you're like, hey, by the way, he was doing this since like 6 and had done it like 20 times by the time he was 15. That's obviously a different story, but like, do judges and stuff like that really back then have all that information? I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird too, but he was a lot older. Like he was doing it from a super young age, like into his mid-20s,
for sure.
30s, right?
Yes.
And then like the connection with...
But he kept getting let out in his teens, which almost like reinforced, you just do it, you go to jail, and you come back out.
Right. And then the connection between that and the clinic in San Francisco, that free clinic that he was basically bringing everybody to, and they were giving them LSD. Like that gets crazy with MK Ultra being connected to it, and mind control, and the whole thing with the 60s, the hippies protesting against the Vietnam War. Fascinating book, man.
Well, the part to me that also becomes like kind of wild is I guess at one point there was some murders that people in the cult carried out. And then there was another one, but they wrote, if I understand it correctly, the same thing on the wall in like blood. And they were trying to write something that would like make it look like it was another group committing the murders. But they wrote the same thing on the wall, and the cops like didn't put 2 and 2 together at first. Yeah. And so like, I always just go back to like how advanced so many aspects of society are now that we have the internet. Right? Like if you're a cop and there's somewhere buried in like a paper police report, some detail, like something was written on the wall. How do you know if you a different cop that shows up to a different crime scene?
Right.
In the 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever. Like now we're like, oh, you idiots. Like, how did you not know that?
Right.
But you're like, yeah, dude, like it was on paper. We just talked about like, read a book. Right? Like what cop was sitting there going to go through the police reports?
Yeah, man. The incompetence is crazy, right? Like now if the story was like that was published online, there would be somebody in Twitter just like noticing it and posting it, and it would get retweets and people would see it. But back then, before the internet, before the days of the internet, it had to be so much more difficult to kind of link shit like that. I bet so many things like that slipped through the cracks.
Yeah. And the reverse happens, right? Like how many times do we hear stories now? Some, person was locked up for 20 years and then it's like, now we have DNA testing, like innocent.
Yeah. How crazy is that?
It's like, hey guys, DNA testing's been around for a while. Like, how did we not figure that out, 5-10 years ago?
Yeah, dude, that's insane. I just had a guy on my show recently too who did like 16 years in prison, and they found him. He was exonerated because of DNA. They actually found the guy who committed the rape and murder 16 years later. And they brought that guy to jail and then found out that his DNA was the correct DNA.
Oh, so they arrested somebody for something else. Had the DNA taken and then cross-referenced it and realized, wait a minute, this guy actually committed this crime, not the person who's sitting in jail for it.
Exactly.
Jesus Christ.
And I think the guy only got like, I can't remember exactly. I want to say it was like $4 million. He did 16 years in prison and got like $4 or $5 million, most of it which had to go to his attorneys. But could you imagine 16 years in prison for something you didn't do? And I think like they even found a ton of evidence at the site of the murder that didn't even come close to matching this guy. Like it clearly depicted somebody of a different ethnicity than him.
Oh, wow.
And they still just wanted to wash their hands of it and get their prosecution.
Yeah. The two things it makes me think of was Making a Murder. The Netflix
I forgot about
episodic series. I always just think when they have like the 16, 17-year-old boy in the room with the cops, and the cops are like basically saying all this stuff and they're getting him to confess. And then once he gets done, he's like, am I going to go back to school now? And they're like, nah, dude, like, no. And then he's like on the phone or something with, I think, his mom or a relative. And he's like asking, is he going to get let out for WrestleMania? So you can like watch it on TV. And like he has no, like, you're just like listening to him talk and you're like, this kid does not understand that he just admitted to a murder, which maybe he did or did not commit.
Yeah, he has no clue, right?
None. What do you think about like the rise of this was Making a Murder? We talked about like the drug cartel documentaries and that type of stuff, but also Serial, the podcast. I forget the guy's name, who was the supposed suspect, who I think had been arrested during all of that. I just saw now even the prosecutors are saying, hey, we got some more information. We should let this guy out because there was like maybe we don't have as much confidence in him being the person as we once did. It's like, how do you think about the rise of all this like crime content?
Dude, the crime content's crazy.
Some of the most popular content in the world.
I tell my buddy, one of my buddies who comes on the show every once in a while, who has a lot of friends in prison, I told them that they need to get some microphones in there and start their own like in prison podcast because they would make so much fucking money.
It would explode. Can you imagine? Like they're in like it can't be maximum security prison, right? You couldn't get microphones in, but like
maybe. I don't know anything about being in prison, but
yeah.
I mean, if you're in one of those camps, they have cell phones. Why wouldn't they be able to get mics? You know, at least some like small mics.
That's what I'm saying. So like they have to be somewhere where they have some sort of communication.
Yeah. Like even, I mean, think of how much money that the prison owners would make. Like if you owned a prison, if I owned a prison, I would set up my own podcast studio. I'd have multiple. I'd get them in there just churning out podcasts every day, bro. Are you kidding me?
There is other work that is done, right? But like in some way also, did you see who was it? I think actually two guys did it. I don't think Martin Shrekrelli, the pharma bro. I don't think he did a podcast, but the guy from Fire Festival, Billy McFarland.
Oh yeah.
I think at some point they like snuck a microphone in, or maybe he was on the phone, like he was doing like the click call, and they were recording it. And he was, I actually know the guy who did it. Now that I think about it, they called it Dumpster Fire, and he was calling, and they were recording it, and they were turning it into a podcast. And then he got put in the hole.
Oh no way.
For like participating in a podcast without permission.
No way.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, right? Like, I guess that's kind of the whole thing is like, it's all about control. And if you're like going to the phones and participating in podcasts.
Yeah. Everybody's fascinated with people in prison. Like people are just there's like always reporters in there trying to get calls or trying to get one-on-one interviews with prisoners and learn their stories. Cause like those are some of the, I mean, honestly, those people are probably some of the most interesting people in the world.
Yeah. You know what show I feel like we probably had, which was it seems like much more popular when we were younger, is Cops. Remember the cops would they would have somebody with like a full video camera and like a whole video crew like following them around.
Yeah.
And sometimes like they pulled somebody over. Other times it was like bam, foot chase, like whatever.
Yeah.
They do that live now. Do you know that?
No.
They have live cops where like there's I don't know how live it is, but I'm sure there's some sort of time delay, so they don't just like cut to a cop.
They probably just
like
put a live logo on it.
shooting someone or something, right? But the way they present it is like there's a command center, and there's like two guys or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, let's go out to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and officer whoever." Like it's like a red zone, right? But like rather than drop into like the Dolphins game, like let's drop into Tulsa, Oklahoma. We're riding shotgun with officer whatever, which is fucking crazy. And they like record these interactions.
Is there any proof that it's actually live? Or are they allowed to just say it's live?
It's on TV. So
Right.
like, I can't imagine it's 100% real time live. Like maybe there's a time delay.
They're getting desperate.
Something's going on.
TV executives are getting desperate. They're saying, let's call it Cops Live. And we'll put a fucking flashing red light under it and just call it live. I guarantee you.
Yeah. And like, is there, could you get in trouble if you're the executive for saying it's live? Probably not.
No, hell no.
Right? Like people are just like, whatever, does the content good?
Yeah, they could sell it. As long as they can sell it and make more money, they'll get away with it.
So you like watch it and like, it's just a whole different view of the world because you see, they go into people's houses and you're just like, oh my God, this house is just full of trash or like these people are hoarders or these people, there's a domestic dispute and you're just like, dude, that is a chaotic life that like is unfortunate that anyone has to live through.
Yeah.
And it's just this lens and you forget like that's on like, cable networks. Like that's not on, HBO or anything like that. Like if you just have cable, watch it's on Fox or whatever.
Dude, on the way here on 95, right before I turned to go to downtown, there was literally a car. I think it was like a Honda Civic pulled on the side of the interstate, side of the highway. Dude was like aggressively beating the shit out of somebody in the backseat of his car, like full on haymakers.
Wait. What? The car's pulled over.
Welcome to Miami.
All right, the car's pulled over on the side of the road.
Pulled off on the side of the road, literally right before, or I think right after an exit.
Okay.
On 95 South. And this dude was had both doors open and he was aggressively fucking wailing on somebody.
He was in the front seat through the back or he was out of the car?
He was standing on the ground outside on the road and he was punching into the car, beating the shit out of somebody.
And no one was stopping.
Nobody was stopping.
I mean, are you surprised that no one was stopping?
No, I'm not surprised.
No, I'm not surprised at all, right?
That's not something you typically see in Tampa. When you see that, you know you're in Miami.
Is that how people who live in the Tampa area think of Miami? Is like Miami's where the crazy shit happens?
Maybe I don't really live in Tampa. I live on the beach. I live on Indian Rocks Beach. So yeah, when you think of Miami, you think of like another country, really. I mean, it's not really the United States.
The rest of the country now also thinks of Miami as another country?
Probably, right?
People who still live in California or New York.
The traffic here is way worse than California.
You think?
Yes.
I don't know if I'd agree with that. Like LA, probably not. LA's the only place in the world where there's like 8 lanes and it's still bumper to bumper traffic.
Right.
Right. So like maybe outside of LA and other parts of California, yeah, Miami traffic could be bad. But also like rush hour in New York is pretty bad as well.
Maybe not New York. Yeah, you're right.
Gridlock.
You're right.
So like in the downtown areas, right? Or like on the LA highway, maybe those areas are worse. But yes, traffic, especially on like the lower end of 95 can get pretty bad.
Yeah, when I got off of 95, it said I was literally going to be here in like 10 minutes, and I was not here for like another 30, 40 minutes. This place is fucking crazy, man.
Yeah. Well, and also,
I love Miami, by the way.
Also, when it rains here, it just floods.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Like recently there was a rain and I was at a restaurant on South Beach with 3 other guys, and we were sitting, there's like a window to the right, and the sidewalk's on the other side of the window, and I'm sitting with my back to the window, and all of a sudden one of the guys like, dude, it's really pouring outside. So I turn and I look, and definitely raining a lot, but nothing out of the ordinary yet. And 20 minutes later, he's like, dude, now look. And I turned and I look, and the water was starting to like rise on the road. And I was like, oh, that's kind of crazy, but like, whatever. We still got like another hour at dinner. Like maybe it'll get better. Dumb idea. So then like half an hour later, he's like, dude, it's over the curb. And I look and I swear the water was literally over the curb, like kind of like peeking over. And so this specific restaurant, there's nowhere to park. So it's all valet for the most part. And when people were leaving the restaurant, they were pulling the cars up onto the sidewalk. So people could get in the car without having to go in their ankle deep water.
You know, they get their Gucci shoes wet.
And I was just like, dude, these guys are pros. Like there was no, what do we do? It was just like, oh, we probably deal with this like once a week. So like just drive the cars up on the sidewalk.
Well, what happens to the parking garages that are underground that go down? Like, do they get completely like, are those underwater? Or what happens to those parking garages?
No, I'm sure that they've got some sort of drainage and
Okay.
You would hope. Now, again, I'm sure there's somewhere where that's not true. Over a couple blocks over in Brickell, there's one area, there's a Publix, and it's like notorious when it rains really bad, it floods. So if you remember a couple of months ago, there was all these videos of people like leaving the club at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and they were like falling in the water. There was cars that were like hitting huge holes because at the time they were doing construction right there. And so there was like a hole in the ground, but it was like they had the cones and everything. So during the day, no one, I mean, you'd have to be an idiot to somehow end up in the construction hole. But when the water had risen up, no one knew it was there. So there was a car with like its front left tire had like gone in. And so it was that like a vertical thing. And I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, dude, I'm so glad that I'm not going to like clubs and walking out in
Oh my God.
knee-high water.
What brought you to Miami? Like, how did you end up here?
This episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens. I drink AG1 by Athletic Greens every single day. I started it out a couple of years ago, and I liked it so much that I even became an investor in the business. Every single day, rather than take a bunch of pills for vitamins and minerals, I simply take 1 scoop of AG1 in a glass of water. It gives me 75 vitamins, minerals, probiotics, superfoods, and adaptogens. I really, really like it because it's so simple. If you go and you sign up at athleticgreens.com/pomp today, they will give you 1 year of immune supporting vitamin D for free, and they will also give you 5 free travel packages. Go to athleticgreens.com/pomp today to get started. Stop taking all those vitamin and mineral pills and just take 1 scoop of AG1. athleticgreens.com/pomp. Go check them out today. I'm still trying to figure that out. No, I was in New York. I think we just wanted to leave New York. Like,
You're born and raised in New York?
I was actually born in Hollywood, Florida.
Oh, okay.
And then grew up in North Carolina, went and lived in California for a little bit, and then was in New York. And I mean, New York, I love, will always love, but like it just started to decline to some degree, right? It's very similar to California.
Right.
And I think that's why you saw like the net move out of those 2 states, right, into places like Texas or Florida.
Is that when you moved here?
I moved, we decided in November of 2020, we moved the first week of January of 2021. And so there were people here from like the business tech kind of investing world, but there wasn't a lot yet. And then like March, April, May of 2021, it was like every single person I knew was like, I'm thinking about moving to Miami. And I was like, oh shit, like this was a great decision.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest difference, frankly, like in hindsight, is people are just happier in Florida. Like, I don't know if it's the sun. I don't know if it's like you go outside more.
Yeah.
If it's not like you feel cramped because of the building, for whatever reason. Just like people seem much happier.
It's similar to New York right here, though. Like this downtown Miami,
Yes,
this Brickell area is not really Florida.
Yeah. That's why I think a lot of folks from New York, when they come, they basically move to like 2 areas, kind of a midtown-ish area. And then Brickell at first, because it's the most like Manhattan or New York. And then from there, they kind of spread out to wherever they're going to go after a little while. But it's like, you don't want to like rip the Band-Aid off. Imagine going from like, I don't know, Lower East Side to like Montana.
Right. That's
right?
brutal.
You'd be like, all right, this is a little weird. So I don't know.
Yeah, man. I feel like Tampa and where I'm from, like the beaches are so much more rural and open. And even though they're still kind of like little cities, but there's nothing like Miami. Like where I live, you can drive down the beach. There, it's wide open. There's not really many high rises except for like on the edge of the beach, like all the big condos and stuff.
In Tampa, there's a Netflix show now on like Selling Sunset, but it's Selling Tampa. Have you seen this?
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
I had no idea.
And it's all about like some brokerage that's like blowing up or whatever. And they're positioning it as like Tampa's, on the come up. Is that true?
I think so. Tom Brady's there. The Lightning are apparently, I don't know anything about hockey, but I know like the Lightning are all the rage right now.
Do people in Tampa
We got
think
the best
this?
strip clubs.
According to who?
According to the world. Tampa is the strip club capital of the world.
That's not true.
Yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah, they're way better than the ones in Miami.
No, but like, is there like a strip club ranking?
Yeah, there is. If you even Google it, like if you just search for like, I'm sure he can do it, but if you search for like America's top strip clubs, the top like 2 or 3 are in Tampa. I've had the guy who owns the most famous strip club in the world on my show too.
Really?
Yeah.
What did he say?
He was just
Like, what makes it so famous?
He was the first strip club in, I believe, maybe in the U.S. I could be wrong. Might be just in Florida, but he was the first full nude strip club, legally full nude, and he had to fight the city and the government forever.
Yeah,
and now he's doing this whole new thing where he's suing the government to like grow his own marijuana because he has cancer, and he's using it for medicinal purposes. But he's a badass. Like he would be out in the street like fighting with cops and like protesting with the protesters because I guess it was I think it was like a free speech debate, right? To be able to have the strippers there. And then Tampa tried to create the mayor of Tampa tried to institute a law where if you got a lap dance, the stripper had to be like 5 feet away from you. Like it had to be a 5-foot distance to get a lap dance.
2 weeks to flatten the curve.
Yeah. And he fought it to the death. And yeah, so now.
What's fascinating to me is like a lot of these folks are real estate investors. That's how they actually get started. There's some guys here in Miami who they own like 11, which is like a club, but got some other things going on. And they back into it because they're like buying properties. And then like some of them are zoned for strip clubs or, liquor licenses, whatever. But I never realized how much they fight with the city council and the local government and like all that stuff is like a whole new world.
You mean once you own like commercial real estate?
Well, just like think of these real estate developers. So like Tampa obviously has strip clubs, now that I know that, but also bars or whatever. Like a lot of that business is dealing with local regulations and understanding, okay, they're going to put this through street and they won't put a red light outside. And so like, does that increase, think if you're a bar, like a super extreme example would be like, hey, you're trying to petition to get a red light put outside so people will stop because your drunk patrons leaving at night and you want them to be able to cross the street safely. So you don't take on more legal liability for owning a place that's selling alcohol and somebody goes, this thing gets hit by a car. But like, you don't get to put the red light up. Right. Like there's like, you got to go through a process. And then there's like the other side of it, which is like the city's telling you like you can't do something, or in this case, like, hey, you can't have a strip club or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just like this battle.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like if you want, it's interesting to think like once you, even just like if you're thinking small, like people that don't want to be like big shots or be like dealing with government or about to say, I want to own some real estate, I want to make some money, but you unknowingly get into political shit once you own more and more real estate because now you have to deal with the government. Now you have to deal with these regulations and fight them and try to schmooze people and take people out to dinner. And
of course, one of the things a very large real estate investor told me one time, he goes, half the job is knowing who's responsible for what in the local government and being able to get them to do it.
Yeah.
And when he said that, I was like, holy shit. Like, I thought it was just, you run some numbers and like buy a building. But he was like, no, he's like, that's actually the important stuff. Because then you get into like, from an investment perspective, there's opportunity zones. So like, I don't know if you know about these, but you can basically invest in certain predetermined areas. And if you hold the real estate for 10 years, it's tax-free, all the gains.
Oh, really?
You know who created this law?
Who?
Sean Parker. You know Sean Parker is the guy, you ever seen The Social Network, the Facebook video movie?
Yeah.
The guy who helped Zuckerberg, who's played by Justin Timberlake, that's Sean Parker, who also started Napster.
Oh, no shit.
He like teamed up with this other guy, and I think it was during, I can't remember if it was right at the end of Obama's term or right when Trump got office, but it was like right around that 2014 to like 2016 period. And they basically convinced the federal government to create the opportunity zones. And the whole idea is like, hey, there's parts of every city that is underinvested. And like if we incentivize investors through tax breaks to invest in those areas, we'll like improve them. So like theoretically makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But the incentive is like if you buy property and hold it for 10 years, you don't pay any taxes on the gains.
Oh, wow. Well, that's what every real estate investor does, right? They're just trying to fight the loopholes. That's what keeps it going.
Yeah.
They're just trying to like the 1031 exchange, buy it and sell it and reinvest the profits and move on to something bigger. I mean, that's what keeps the whole fucking gravy train moving, really. It's just people trying to find the holes and to beat the next guy.
Yeah. I saw an investor on Twitter recently giving a crash course to somebody who's asking him questions. And this guy's very sophisticated. He was explaining a cash out refi and how like the difference between what you bought the property for and what you get the refi at, like that money is tax free. And like you could just see this person was like, what do you mean you get hundreds of thousands of dollars and you don't pay taxes on it? He's like, no, it's like part of the loan. And I was like watching this in real time. And then I went back and then like later he was like sharing threads to like a whole real estate account that was talking about, segregation studies and all this. And I was like, it's a whole different world.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's so many ways to make money. There's so many different crazy, weird ways to make money. But like real estate is the one thing that's like, it doesn't take a lot to understand it. It's just like hard work. If you put in the hard work and you meet the right people, you can make pretty much anything you want to happen in real estate.
Yeah.
You don't have to have like some sort of special knowledge. You could be nobody. You could have nothing. And you could.
I think it's more than 50% of millionaires in the United States made it through real estate.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming, and again, big assumption, I'm assuming a portion of that is literally just including their primary residence. Mm-hmm. So if you bought a house 20 years ago for $100,000 and now it's worth $300,000, like that's 30% of the way to being a millionaire, right? So like there's some of that going on. But yeah, real estate by far is an asset class that probably helps mint more millionaires than anybody else.
What do you think about people like that guy Grant Cardone who like try to sell all these real estate courses and they'd like project their wealth and stuff? Like that guy's always around my town. Like he's always in
he bought a lot of stuff in Tampa, I think.
Oh, did he really?
I think he bought I might get this wrong. I'm pretty sure that he bought like a pretty big 500 unit apartment complex or something.
Oh, really? But he does this weird thing where he like sells his YouTube subscribers. He gets his YouTube followers to invest in his properties.
Yeah. So I have a lot of thoughts about this. I think this is where the world is going, but I think it's also like very uncharted waters, right? So like if you think about, go to the other extreme. Like if you're, I don't know, BlackRock or Blackstone. Let's use Blackstone as an example. You're a huge, billions and billions and billions of dollars of assets. When you want to raise a fund, what do? You like take the idea, you put in some documents, you put together a pitch deck, and then you go to all these institutions and you show up to hospitals, university endowments, foundations, pension funds, like all these huge pools of capital. So like when people think of like a pension fund, you think of like, oh, I work for like a city or something. I'm putting my money into the pension and then they're going to like invest it. And then when I retire, they're going to pay me out whatever the money is. Mm-hmm. Like, where do they invest it? Like, sure, some of it's in the stock market, but usually the pension fund is not the one like, should we buy Apple or Walmart today? Right? They're giving it to investors. They're giving it to managers.
Right.
And so they'll turn around and they'll say like, hey, we have $2 billion in our pension fund for name your city in America. And then they'll be like, hey, Blackstone, we'll give you $25 million for your real estate fund or for your hedge fund or whatever. Mm-hmm. So they're like raising money through these institutions. But really in many of those cases, the institution is actually managing money for like the individual, right? The pension fund is actually, that's not the pension fund's money. It's the pensioners' money that they're supposed to be growing until people retire.
Right.
Just like in every other part of society where like middlemen are getting cut out, I think what you're starting to see is people realize, well, why don't we just cut out those middlemen, those institutions, and go direct to people?
Right.
Now, the positives are there's a lot of folks who want access to institutional real estate or stocks or venture capital or whatever. The downside is like there's a hell of a lot of risk, right? So you get kind of pros and cons with it, and it's less about like what do I think? Is it good or bad? It's just like it's going to happen and it's going to accelerate. And so we have accreditation laws, right? Where you have to be an accredited investor, you have to have a certain net worth or make a certain amount of money every year. The positive is like that's supposed to protect you. The downside is like I know a lot of dumb rich people, right? Who like, doctors. I've talked to a lot of doctors and they're like, dude, my colleagues, they don't know anything about investing. but they make $400,000-$500,000 a year.
Right.
So a lot of cash. So like, they all think that they're going to find the next Facebook. So they like angel invest. And it's like,
yeah, they all think that.
the 18-year-old kid that lives in their neighborhood. And you're like, dude, the odds that you happen to live next to the next Mark Zuckerberg is like -%. Right. But like that's been celebratized. And so in some way, it's just like, that's what's going on. It's like, they're like, okay, let me pick the manager. I don't know.
That's interesting.
Why? What do you think?
I don't know. I don't know anything about it. I just know the guy is always flying in and out of Clearwater, going to the Scientology Center, and he's walking up and down like downtown Clearwater, like talking to his phone. And I've seen him literally like talking to his phone, walking like up and down right in front of the Scientology Center before.
What is the Scientology Center? Do you know?
Yeah, it's like the hub. It's like the hub of Scientology. I've never been inside.
Or I
grew up like 5 minutes away from it.
Are non-Scientologists, I think it's the right term, allowed to go inside?
No, I don't think so.
So you got to be like,
not unless you like want to like actually sign up and learn about it. Like you could fake wanting to, you could like get in there if you faked not knowing anything about it and like, I want to get into this. But normal people aren't allowed.
I'm shocked that you live 5 minutes and you haven't done that video yet.
No. Fuck. I'm too afraid of.
I don't know anything about it, but it seems like, there's like, because Tom Cruise, I think, is one as well.
Tom Cruise. Yeah, Tom Cruise. I think he has an apartment right across the street from there in Clearwater. John Travolta, a bunch of people.
Oh, John Travolta's in too?
Yeah,
he's in the crew, the club?
Yeah, he's a Scientologist, man. The thing is,
it's a religion.
It's not. It's technically a legal religion. Yeah, they.
Why technically?
Well, it's. I mean, I guess it's legitimately a religion. It's not just technically a religion, but the reason it became a religion was because they wanted to be tax free. Oh. So they did this crazy thing where they had like all of their members, like tens and tens of thousands of people, file their own individual lawsuits against the IRS, and basically bullied the IRS into giving them the religion exemption.
That's real?
Yeah, that's real.
Oh, I didn't know that.
There's a crazy documentary on HBO called Scientology: The Prison of Belief.
And it talks about this specific.
Oh yeah, it goes into all of it. Like the top guys who were into Scientology, right next to like the vice president of Scientology, literally like defected, went away from it, and he basically explained everything that happened.
Wow,
it's wild. And the head of Scientology, the guy who created it, L. Ron Hubbard, he died, I think, in like the 80s, but he was also the most prolific nonfiction writer of all time. He's wrote more nonfiction than anybody in history. And so basically the premise of Scientology is there's this galactic overlord named Xenu who spawned some race out of a volcano. And there's these spirit entities that exist called thetans that are like these non-physical entities that you can't see that can come in or get out of you depending on how clear you are in Scientology. So the more you learn, the more deep you get into Scientology, like if there's levels, just like a pyramid scheme. And once you get to like the top level, they start teaching you about this crazy intergalactic sci-fi things, like sci-fi shit that would scare any normal person away if they saw that at face value. But
why do you think all these guys are so many, like John Travolta, Tom Cruise, Grant Cardone?
Well, they got in it, I think. I think most of the people got in it because I think there's a lot of value in the book Dianetics. Like it's basically like being the best version of yourself, optimizing yourself, getting rid of all the negative influences in your life. There's a lot of like positive psychological elements to the premise of Scientology, to Dianetics, to basically help people become the best version of themselves they can possibly become. But once you get past that, like you get into that, you start to like pay some money for the fees. Some of these people pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to keep rising the ranks. They get stuck and they feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, you know? And once you get to a certain level, they start saying, okay, now you're aware enough to read the next chapter. And then they start to bring in the more crazy and crazy shit. And another weird part of it is there's this thing called auditing that you have to do when you're in Scientology. So you have to go and do this thing called auditing where you go in basically to a room and you hold these two metal rods and this person asks you questions about your personal life. And you basically spill your guts about everything in your life, all the most fucked up things you've done, your worst thoughts you've ever had. And they keep detailed records of all this shit. And I think that's probably what happened with Tom Cruise and with John Travolta is they probably, told them their deepest, darkest secrets, and they don't want those to be made public.
I feel like if it came out, like, and they could say anything about Tom Cruise, people would be like, yep, okay.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't know what it is. I think they basically, like most people in Scientology get kept on some sort of a leash to where they're not allowed to interact with people of the outside world or anyone with like dissenting views or ideologies. Mm-hmm. Like if there's rules, like if you talk to somebody who's not cool with Scientology, it's a community of snitches. So they all spy on each other and they all tell on each other. So if you see somebody doing something that's not like by the rule book of Scientology, they go and snitch on them, and then you get in trouble. And you go, I had the dad of the head of Scientology, David Miscavige, on my podcast.
Oh, really?
I had his dad on there.
Is his dad in?
No, his dad was in, but he was imprisoning his dad, and his dad escaped. Like literally, it was like a prison break type thing.
What?
Yeah, bro. It is absolutely
what was his dad
bananas.
Saying?
His dad was basically explaining his childhood. His son was really young, he was super motivated, super intelligent. Mm-hmm. And he went to go work for L. Ron Hubbard, who's the guy who founded Scientology in Hollywood, like working on film sets and stuff like that. And eventually just became L. Ron Hubbard's right-hand man, like his assistant. And then eventually L. Ron Hubbard died and David Miscavige just took over. He just had it in him to he was this
leader.
This leader, yeah. He had this strong personality and he made everyone follow him. And I don't think he's been in the public light for years now because of all the stuff that's come out recently. I mean, there's tons of documentaries and TV shows of people that have left Scientology talking about how fucked up it is inside. And, there's people being held like slaves being held in the building in Clearwater, that people that were there, stuck there for years, that they weren't allowed to do anything. Like they were literally kept in rooms and they had to work for free and they weren't allowed to leave. It's scary shit.
I saw a documentary on, what's the church? They go and they like protest, all sorts of like, maybe it's like abortion clinics. They go and they protest, like when soldiers die, I think. Westboro? Is that a
is
that thing, right? Like they go and they protest and all stuff. And there was a woman who had defected, I guess. Mm-hmm. And she was talking about it. And she was like, I believed every single, like all these things. And they were like showing her videos of herself and she was like holding signs and I forget what they were saying, but the signs were just like, when you look at the sign as a person with my background or your background, right? And not having grown up in that environment, you're like, that's like crazy stuff.
Yeah, dude, it's crazy what you
she was saying. She's like, no, you don't understand. Like I believed that in that video. That's not me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy when you get sucked into shit like that. Like that just becomes everything to you. You believe something, it feels right. Like you think you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
You don't have an outside perspective.
I always think of whenever I see stories in the news, intention. Like people can do good things by accident. Like they weren't trying to do good, right? They actually could be like nefarious actors who like fucked up and somehow did something good. Or somebody could be good intention, trying to do the right thing, and they do something wrong. And if you just like read an article, you're never going to know. But like there are certain stories that blow up where if you think of take Fyre Festival as an example, like an entire generation of people know it as like this huge screw up, right? Kid gets in trouble, like all this type of stuff. But it's like when I look at that, I'm like, based on the information that we have, was that person trying to do the right thing or not? And we'll never know the answer, right? But like, if you knew definitively, like that was someone trying to do something nefarious, you'd think of it very differently than if you knew definitively, like that person was trying to be a good person and like do the right thing and like they just fucked it up, right? And what becomes interesting about this is you then look at these situations. I don't know if you saw a couple of weeks ago, there was a guy in Indiana who ran into a burning building, burning house. He was a food delivery guy. You see this?
I didn't see this.
He's driving down the street. And all of a sudden he sees smoke coming out of a house. He's like, that was weird. He stops, he backs up, and he looks. He's like, oh shit, that house is on fire. So he like runs towards the house and somehow gets the back door. I don't know if he couldn't get in the front door or what, but he gets to the back door. And I think he like busted into the house. And he's like, holy shit, there's like flames and there's smoke everywhere and like all this stuff. And so he starts yelling, whatever. And he starts going up some stairs. And as he's going up the stairs, all of a sudden there's 3 or 4 kids like under the age of like 12. All of a sudden come busting out of a room. And he like grabs them and he like takes them to the back door and gets them out. And he says to them, he's like, is there anybody else in the house? And they're like, our little sister, I think. And he's like, where? And they're like, she's inside, she's 6. So this fucking savage goes back into the burning house and he like, I think what happens is he goes upstairs and he like finds her and he comes back down, but he's lost now. He doesn't know where the back door is. So he's stuck in the house. So at some point he like looks up and he sees the stairs and there's like light. So he goes back up the stairs and he goes to a window and he punches out the window. When he punches out the window, obviously he cuts up his whole arm and everything. And he jumps off the second story with this little girl. And the reason why the story got so much attention was the police are showing up at this point. They all have the body cams on. And so they're like showing up. And of course they're like, there's somebody inside. And like the firefighters are like not moving as fast as you would think they would be doing if someone was inside. But there's like chaos or whatever. And all of a sudden here comes this guy running around the side of the house and he's got this little girl and he like collapses into the police's arms, hands the baby, and he falls on the ground. And they have his arm blurred out in the video. So you know it's got to be bad if they're like blurring it. And the first words he says to the cops, he goes, is the little girl okay? He didn't give a fuck about his arm. Like, and you just like watching, you're like, 99 out of 100 times, that dude is a good dude who just acted in the moment and went and like did this. And you can tell because you have video, you hear the stories, like all the details, there's other people there or whatever, but we don't always get that. And so to me, it's like this fascinating example where like normally we just get like a little snippet. We don't get the body cam footage. We don't get to hear what the kids said or anything. It's just like, oh, somebody did something. And we're just left to like, I don't know. They say he's a good person. Say he's a bad person. Like, I don't know. You know, it's so different now.
I thought you were going somewhere else with this.
With what?
I thought you were going to tell me that this guy was like a child molester or something at the end.
No.
Like, we think he's such a good guy, but he's
I
really
don't think
a piece
so.
of shit.
Yeah, I don't think so.
He just wanted the kids.
No, but it's just like in that moment, like, you know, the hero is the person you least expect, right? It's like the pizza delivery guy who's like just driving down randomly.
Right.
And it goes back to this whole thing of just like, man, that's somebody who just like was trying to do the right thing.
I think generally people want to do the right thing.
You think?
Yeah, I think generally. I think people get caught up, like get lost in it. Like I think the Fire Festival guy, I think he was genuinely trying to make that shit work, don't you?
Yeah, I think so.
Like I think he basically like got in a little bit over his head and shit started hitting the fan and he's like tried to do everything in his possible reach to make that shit work. Yeah. And it obviously didn't work. I don't think people really want to fuck people over. I mean, I think sometimes they get backed into a position where they really have no choice. They have to like pick the lesser of the two evils, but
it's also, if you go back to like when all the PPP loans were coming out, I have a friend who he works in credit, right? And he was like, as soon as that stuff started, he was like, now's the time when the fraud's going to start. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah. He was like, a lot of people don't realize that like all the fraudulent stuff around loans and all that type of stuff is because people get desperate. Right. So he was like, you know, and this is like secondhand, but he was basically like, yeah, like a lot of times if you go and you look at, you know, some major corporation or something, or somebody who is trying to get one of these PPP loans or whatever, they like, oh, let me change this one detail this one time. Next thing you know, it spirals out of control. And so like, I don't know. It also makes you think how much social media like exasperates all of this, right? Like many of these stories, the guy in Indiana, if we were living 50 years ago, like you and I wouldn't even heard of it. Right. Because it wasn't in our local paper and it wasn't on local radio or maybe local television. Now, like, that shit went fucking viral. Yeah. Right. People in other countries know about this random dude in Indiana. And so like, it just is like steroids to the stories. Yeah. I mean, individuals definitely, you know, like people like that, you see stories like that with individual people because like if you're by yourself and you see something really bad happening or you see someone suffering, I feel like there's just this thing in our nature to help people. But the polar opposite of that, look, you went to Iraq, right? So like the military industrial complex
starting wars, killing tons of innocent people just to make tons and tons of fucking profit and tons of money. Like you think of all those people in the government, Dick Cheney and all the bureaucrats in the US government, the arms dealers that were making billions of dollars. Like there's this diffusion of responsibility when you get caught up in this giant system where it's just like this competition for money.
I also think a lot about like local decisions, global decisions. So like, let's say that we're in a corporation with 10,000 people and you and I are like customer service reps, right? We have no ability to make global decisions like for the entire corporation or any of that type of stuff. We're only local decision makers. So like maybe I make some decisions on calls that differ from yours, or maybe we make the same or whatever. Maybe we become a manager of like a team of like 5 to 10 people and we can make some local decisions for that team. But like the local decision makers have almost no impact on like what happens to the corporation or kind of the global. The reverse is also true, which seems weird because like the CEO in a lot of these like large organizations, they can make very big, decisions, but like their ability to control the decision making that happens like on the phone with the customer service rep, very hard. Right. Like it goes back to the diffusion. It's almost like the further you are away from like impact, the decision maker has less and less impact. Right. And so a lot of times scandals and things that we read about in the news, especially in the business world, most of the time, not every time, but most of the time, it's not actually the CEO. Yes, there are these outlier situations, but like, it's like, a team did something, or there was like some weird practice that got put, some weird hiring practice, or there was some like controversial decision that was made or whatever. And of course, as the CEO, like they're responsible, whether they did it or not, right? Like those CEO of the business, their business. But it's just very, I don't know, it's just weird, right? And like if you go to like the military industrial complex stuff, like who's responsible? Could we point to one person? Like I guess you could just be like, leadership 101, like the person at the top, the president of the United States is responsible. Like that'd be one argument. Another argument is like, no, actually there was like even like a public-private thing. Like there was the government, then there was all the defense contractors. You watch something like War Dogs. You ever seen that movie?
Oh yeah, he's coming to my podcast tomorrow or Wednesday.
Is he?
Yeah.
Which one?
Packhouse.
Oh. so like that's real. Right? Like that whole situation is like a real thing. Like who's responsible for that?
The government, bro. Are you kidding me? Like it's like they wanted the cheapest shit they could get to arm the Afghans, right? Like they didn't give a fuck how good the guns and the ammo were for the Afghans, but they had this embargo on China, this political thing they had to portray to the public.
But like, is it when you say the government, right? Like this is where it gets into, is it the politicians? Is it like, I don't know, a general who's going in and like he's part of the legislation or whatever? Is it like the lobbyist? Right? There's like all these different parts to just like the government. And it gets weird because like, agreed, right? Like the government. Right. And then it's like, okay, cool. Who is the government?
Right.
Yeah. And you're like, actually, it's like a little bit of all of them.
Right.
Right. It's kind of like 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. You can't blame the 3. You got to almost like try to break it down. It's very fucking weird.
It is, man. I mean, it's fucking crazy to me that there was even a website where you could just go bid on these federal contracts like this.
But there's pros and cons to that.
Yeah.
Right. Like in some way, it helps small businesses.
Right.
In another way, 2 dudes with a fucking computer.
They didn't do anything bad, really. Did they? Like they didn't really. I know Packhouse didn't make any money. He got fucked. But
yeah, well, it goes back to like, again, good intention, bad intention, right? Which again, you should ask, right? Try to unpack that. But also, it's like, did you know that it was something you weren't supposed to be doing? Well, like Uber, when they went to New York City, knew that they weren't supposed to be providing the Ubers because the taxi medallions and all this shit, but like they had to push up against the local regulation in order to get people to do it. So it's like very weird.
Very blurry.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with War Dogs. It's almost the same thing as Fire Festival. Like they got in so deep, they got the contract. Fuck, we got to do everything we can to fill this order.
Give us $20 million.
Now all we have is this Chinese. We're already balls deep into this deal. We have to do everything we can. So repackage it, put it in cardboard boxes, and
the reverse is happening right now. Do you know with Russia, China, and oil and like energy. This episode is brought to you by 8 Sleep. Good sleep is a game changer, and the 8 Sleep Pod is the best sleep machine. I sleep on it every single night. A great night of sleep allows you to be healthier, be more rested, and have more energy throughout the day. And on the brand new 8 Sleep Pod 3, you can sleep as cold as 55 degrees Fahrenheit or as hot as 110 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the secret of thermoregulation. Better sleep, better energy. Get yourself an 8 Sleep. You can go to 8sleep.com/pomp today to go ahead and get $150 off your order. 8sleep.com/pomp. Not only do I sleep on it every night, it literally changed my life, and I begged the founders to let me invest in the company. 8sleep.com/pomp. Go get yourself an 8 Sleep Pod and get a better night of sleep.
So Russia, I don't know the details, but I think Russia is getting super rich off China buying their oil.
So yes, but Europe is like virtue signaling. We're not going to buy Russian oil or natural gas, right? Or at least most Russian or European countries are saying like, hey, we're not going to do this. We don't want to support this country that just invaded Ukraine, all stuff. So guess who they're buying it from? The Chinese.
Oh my God.
But guess what China's getting it from? Russia. So literally there was this article, I think it was in like New York Times or Wall Street Journal. And it was like, Russia is selling their energy to China. China's just like marking it up 2x and turning around and selling it to Europe. Which like, again, you look at it and you're like, this is so dumb. But then that's like the global analysis with all of the information. But you look at each individual decision and you're like, oh, okay, European country A doesn't want to buy from Russia because they don't want to support this like situation. Okay, like I think most people are like, all right, like I see that logic. I might agree, might not agree, whatever, but like I see the logic. But then when you're like, oh, by the way, okay, Russia's just going to sell to China. China's going to mark it up 2x. And now you're going to go broke and also potentially freeze.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Dude, it's so weird. Everything's about making money. Everything is just about money. Like it's all about, like me and him were talking about earlier, the world is the WWE, bro.
Why do you think that? I know Matt thinks that. Why do you think that?
It's all about fucking gimmicks. It's all about selling gimmicks. It's all about selling perspective and like selling stories. That's really what it all is.
How do you think about the state of like media and content today? Like along those lines, if everything's a story, how much of it is like on the internet away from the big, whether it's the Disneys, the Hollywood studios and like the New York Times of the world versus like those are still very relevant and will be for a long time? I
don't know. I don't think that big media companies are gonna be around forever for much. I don't know how much longer, but like New York Times and like cable news and for sure like traditional cable TV shows are dying on the vine, right? Like the reality show boom that happened 10 years ago with like Pawn Stars and Duck Dynasty and all that shit. Nobody watches that. I don't think anymore.
Duck Dynasty was fucking fire when it came out.
Duck Dynasty was sick, wasn't
it? These dudes got beards and they're rich. Like if America was enthralled.
Yeah. It's evolving. I think the independent
what does it get replaced
journalism wins over everything. I think
independent journalism
like the people like you and me, the people that are just like have microphones in a room talking about shit and invite like it's such a natural exchange doing shit like this, right? Because we're talking on each other's shows and we help each other because we're exchanging our views, our audience, the eyeballs, the attention, and there's no conflicting manipulative outside elements in this, right? It's just it's natural.
I think a lot about you ever seen like people are like, oh, would you take $500,000 or dinner with Jay-Z? You ever seen that like meme on the internet?
Yeah.
Would you rather be, let's say, doing documentaries with the New York Times, or would you rather have a YouTube channel with 500,000?
A YouTube channel, 100%. Are you kidding? All day. I don't know who else. I don't know who.
I think that if you went and you asked people, and I'm picking on New York Times just because they're probably the biggest from a subscriber standpoint, but like all of the major mainstream media, and you ask them, would you rather be in your job or would you rather be with the YouTube channel with 500 subscribers? I think most of them would pick the YouTube channel too.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I definitely think so. I mean, I spent a lot of my life trying to sell TV shows to like big TV networks.
What was that like?
And it was terrible. I mean, it was fun doing it. Like I did a couple of big projects where I spent years like in crazy situations filming really crazy shit, like in the One of them, I got to spend like 5 years in the Caribbean, like just to film a TV pilot. And then I got to shop the sizzle I got to meet with all the biggest TV networks there are. And it ended up being like 6 years, and the thing got to a green light meeting at Spike TV, and the CEO of Viacom killed it at the green light meeting. And that was just like, okay, where do we go from here? Like, this is 6 years.
It's just over.
It's not necessarily over. I mean, you can keep trying. I mean, a lot of it's just
but over with Spike TV.
With Spike TV, yeah. But we had already pitched it to like every other network. And the weird thing about doing it is like you take this cool idea that you think is great, that you've been working on forever, that you think is exciting, and you pitch it to all these buyers. They all have notes. They all want to be like, make these edits for us. We think we can sell it if you change it this much. All 16 production companies are saying that same thing. And so at the end of the day, you're just banging your head against a wall trying to re-edit stuff to hopefully sell it and get paid for this project you've been working on for 5 years. And 99% is not going to go anywhere. And that's how I started my YouTube channels. I started just taking the stuff that I was trying to sell to traditional TV networks and packaging it for YouTube. And that's why I learned to just start my own shit. Yeah.
And how long did it take for you to realize it was going to work?
To realize what YouTube was going to work?
Yeah. Like the first video you post, how many views does it get?
A couple hundred, maybe. I was learning from. I just talked to a bunch of my friends. I have a really good friend who they just sold their company called DuPont Registry.
Okay, what is that?
It's basically like the millionaire's auto trader. It's just like high end cars and yachts, but it's like the auto trader. It started out as like the auto trader for Lambos and Rolls Royces, basically. Okay, and it was really big in like the 90s and early 2000s. And they recently just sold it. But I worked for them right out of high school for my buddy. It was my friend whose parents owned it. So we like developed all the social media stuff for them because it was right when companies decided they needed to be on social media. So my buddy's dad was like, we need a YouTube channel. Danny, you're good at making videos. So we started getting all these crazy cars in all the time and making these sick videos and built a YouTube channel for him. And
so that worked, and you were like, okay,
that worked. I learned kind of the formula there, like how it works when I have unlimited money to do whatever I wanted to do. And then from there, I left there, started working on developing TV, working on movies, and going through that whole rigmarole. And then I went to like, fuck, I'm going back to square one. I'm going back to just YouTube. I'm going to repackage all this crazy shit that I'm working on and posting it myself, and just whatever I think is cool, I'm going to post it online.
How much do you think about the content itself versus like the distribution of it? Like driving people to go see it?
In the beginning of it, it was all distribution. Like I would post a video and then I would email probably like 200 blogs and websites being like, and I would lie to them. I would be like, yo, I just came across this sick video. I think your website viewers would love. Check it out or whatever. I would send that exact email to like 100, 200 blogs and try to get, and it worked.
Really?
A lot of them posted. Yeah. I had one video. One of the first videos I did that really blew up was a video down here. It was a guy buying a $4 million Lamborghini Veneno, and it was one of four. They made one in like maybe one of three. How many colors are in the Italian flag? Three. Maybe?
Three.
So there's green, white, and what's the other color?
Red.
Red. So there was one with green trim, white trim, and red trim. He bought the one with green trim. $4.5 million. He bought it down South Beach, and I filmed like him getting the car delivered. I interviewed him about it. And then I edited the video, emailed a bunch of blogs about it, and the thing had like 2 million views in like 2 days. It was crazy. Whoa. That was the first time I saw a video go viral. I was like watching my phone. Like, holy shit.
What's the next one?
Yeah.
And so what about now?
Now it's
you just post and don't do anything?
Yeah, now it's so much different. Now it's weird because we're like in this podcast world, you know. It's just like I just try to do everything I can to be different from other podcasts because there's so many fucking podcasts. Yeah. Everyone's a podcast. So I try to venture out of like the typical podcast guests that like do the rotation. You know, there's so many people that do so many different podcasts, and I talk to people that are interesting that are on like tons of other podcasts, but most of my podcast episodes that have been most successful were people that had never done podcasts before, people that had never been interviewed on camera before or been in the media at all before.
And is that something that introduces volatility? So you get some of the outsized, super viral, very popular videos, but also you'll post a video and get no views?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of that happens for sure.
I think that's why a lot of people don't do it.
Yeah, because it's risky, right? Like
They need the safety net. They want to know, hey, I'm getting my 50, 100,000 views on every video. They don't want to risk, I could get 5,000 or I could get 5 million.
That's the Nelk Boys model, right? We're just going to get the most, we got unlimited money. Again, Dana White's going to fly in Trump, or we're going to go to Mar-a-Lago. They're going to just get the most famous people they know that are guaranteed going to get. I mean, that's the smart way to do a podcast. You know you're going to be successful. But I think my mindset is the opposite. I want to get people that no one have ever heard of.
Mm-hmm. And what, like, when that happens, do you see those people then blow up and go on a bunch of other podcasts?
Yeah. One of the most successful examples of that is this guy, Matt Cox, who emailed me when he was in the halfway house. He was literally emailing me from the halfway house right when he got out of prison. He's like, hey, I want to sell my book script. Funny enough, going back to War Dogs, he wrote the manuscript for War Dogs.
What?
And Warner Brothers stole it from him.
Whoa, hold on. Who is this guy? His
name's Matthew Cox. He was a mortgage fraudster. So he committed tons of mortgage fraud in 2004, 2005, I think, 2006, right before the collapse. Mm-hmm. And he was on the run. Basically, what he was doing was he was renting houses and stealing people's identities, taking out mortgages, claiming he was the owner of these houses when he wasn't. So he was getting fake mortgage. He was creating fake people and taking out mortgages under these fake people's names.
That doesn't sound legal.
Yeah.
Okay.
He went to prison for like 20 something years, and he just said, I'm going to become a writer in prison. And he met Deveroli in prison, who's Ephraim Deveroli. He was the guy who basically was the main character of War Dogs. And, he wrote Deveroli's memoir. He basically like went to his cell every day when he was in there and wrote his personal story. And then Deveroli got out before he did. Deveroli only did 4 years. So Deveroli got out, took the manuscript, and sold it to Warner Brothers without Matt's permission.
No way.
Yeah. So there's a big lawsuit that happened.
Oh, so they're still trying to figure it out.
I think they're still trying to figure it out, yeah.
And so did this Matthew Cox, he's out now?
So he got out in 2019, the beginning of 2019.
So he did 12, 15 years?
Yeah. So exactly. I think he did he actually did, I want to say it was 16 years. So 2019 minus 16 years, that's when he went in. So I might be a little bit wrong on when he was committing all that crime. But anyways, he was emailing me right out of the halfway house trying to convince me to do a documentary about him, or sell a TV show about him or a movie about him. And I was just he was emailing me so many times, I kept ignoring his emails. And he's finally, I emailed him back. I'm like, we can do a podcast and see if there's any interest. And then if there's a lot of interest, maybe I can help you in other ways. And he was not interested. And he was on work release. And then one day I had a podcast guest who had to reschedule. And I called Matt up from that while he was in the halfway house. I'm like, yo, can you get here this afternoon and do a podcast? And he did it. And that was like one of my biggest podcasts.
How many views?
I think it had like total maybe like 5 or 6 million views.
And why was everyone so interested? Because
I think it was his personality. He's just charismatic. He's a really charismatic storyteller. He's a really good storyteller. And just the way he told his story, it was just like watching him talk about his story was like watching a fucking movie, like watching a Catch Me If You Can or something like that.
Really?
Yeah. It's fascinating. And he took that opportunity, and he has created his own YouTube channel now. He has like over 50,000 subscribers. He sold thousands of books. He became the face of a company called Home Title Lock. So he's now like the brand ambassador for Home Title Lock. He had companies flying him all across the world, like flying him out to talk to their board members. Like he's really.
So it's kind of like the guy from Catch Me If You Can, where he basically was like, "Hey, I did all these things, but let me teach you how to prevent somebody else from doing all these things." Yes,
exactly.
Got it.
Exactly. So he literally took that opportunity from that podcast, how popular it was, and fucking built like a little empire out of it. It's incredible.
Yeah. It is so cool to see people who nobody knows kind of blow up.
Yeah.
Right? It's like a discovery thing. I think a lot about like talent is so innate to everything that we do in life. Like if you run a business, you're trying to find people to hire. If you're an investor, you're trying to find people to invest in. if you're creating content on the internet in an interview style, you're trying to find people who are interesting, whether they're known already, not known, or whatever. And in some way, you're like a broker, right? You're like trying to find the guest and then bring them to your audience. But there's very few people who can do it where like they're unknown completely to the internet. And those people are special.
Yes. Yeah.
Like when and I do think that like sometimes you like find one. We had one in the Bitcoin world in 2018 where I remember we got done with the interview and I was like, holy shit. And I like bought more Bitcoin. And
really?
Yeah. I was like, dude, I don't even know what you just were talking about, but like that was fucking crazy. And we put it out and it just exploded. I mean, it was like you put it out within the first like 30 minutes. You're like, yep, here we go. And it just exploded. But I do think something about like that probably happens more often than we think. And it's just serendipity, right? Like like this guy just emailed you a bunch. And then another podcast guest didn't show up. And then you called him. He happened to be close. Yeah. And like, you could have never set out to be like, let's go find somebody in the mortgage fraud, world. And like the top down approach wouldn't have worked.
Yeah, you're right. Some of the best shit happens when you don't plan it at all. And it just happens like serendipity.
Yeah. And also I think the New York Times would have never done that. No. Right? Because that person in some way is a risk to the brand. And so like sometimes like the brand actually prevents you from talking to certain types of people. Right? Because like there's a stamp of approval.
Right.
Whether it should be that way or not, it's just in the eyes of the audience. If it's written about in the Wall Street Journal, they stamped it.
Right.
They said this is legit. They said, whatever. And it's why like, I don't know, Theranos. People are like, oh, look at all the reporters who wrote all these articles, like whatever. And they're like, you're supposed to like have the bar. You're supposed to like be the certifier.
Right.
Which like, yes, the internet is taking that power back. Right. And kind of saying, hey, look, maybe that's not a good thing. But like you and I could bring all kinds of people, have a conversation with them and the audience would love it.
Yeah.
Right. Versus like, can you imagine if somebody at the New York Times like talked to this guy?
Yeah. But it's also scary too, because companies like YouTube and Twitter are becoming the same thing. Right.
Do you worry about them taking your stuff down?
Oh yeah. All the time. I mean, I obviously have to think about it. That sucks having to think about it because it stifles your creativity,
We not only think about it, like we like have actively been like, should we like have a plan? Are there things that we're not supposed to talk about? I mean, that's like a crazy thing to say in the United States of America. Are there things that we're not supposed to talk about that we can talk about, but we can put it on the platform and like put it in a way where it won't get taken down?
Like how specifically?
There's certain topics that I personally believe get suppressed.
Really?
You should talk to somebody who says something critical about China and put it on YouTube, and you tell me whether you think that video got suppressed or not. Again, it's not every video, it's not all this stuff, but rather than say CHINA, what if it says CH*NA?
Yeah, I was talking to somebody else who was saying the same thing, but he was basically saying that he thinks about he does long form podcasts, and he's saying that he will personally put the controversial topics towards the end of the podcast, like after the 1.5 hour mark.
Well, he just thinks the YouTube employees won't listen that far.
Right, I guess. I don't know, but like having to like consciously think about that is crazy.
But it's also like, is it just the controversial topics, or like I do wonder? We had our channel deleted one time.
Really?
I don't know if you know this. Yeah, we were like on a live stream, and we were interacting with the audience, doing all this stuff. We had a guest, whatever, and then right at the end of the video ended, and I got like an email and then a second email immediately, and then the channel was just gone. And like I got a big enough Twitter following where I just like raised hell, and I was like, yo, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
And they basically were like, oh, sorry, like an employee made a mistake. And I was like, dude, one employee has the ability to just like zap.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not a YouTube. That's just like every social media platform has this. But like we forget, like, what's the better solution? Right. Like how bureaucratic would it become if you need like 5 employees to approve it?
Right.
So it's local decision, global decision, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure a lot of it has to, like, there are probably individual people working from home from YouTube that work at YouTube that they just have to probably go through and approve 1,000 monetizations on YouTube videos every single day. I mean, maybe not. Maybe it's probably AI.
Yeah. You ever read the stories of the content moderators at Facebook? So
I think so.
a lot of them
I might have seen a podcast about this.
I don't know about the podcast, but there's an article, and a lot of them have like at least the early signs, if not the actual signs of PTSD.
What?
Well, think about it. If so there's two groups of folks. There's the content moderators and then also drone operators. My wife has written about this before. So like the drone operators, I think is like a clear example. So you're like, I don't know, in Arizona in like a room, and it's all computers and stuff, right? And you're sitting there, but you're like operating a drone that's like somewhere else. And all of a sudden they're like, you know, okay, locks on, like, yeah, that's a bad person or whatever. Like fire. You hit a button and it explodes.
That's weird. You're disconnected
And then you like
from this killing that you're doing.
Yeah, and then you like go to like dinner. Right. You know what I mean? Like it's like a weird thing.
Right.
Whatever. So like there's been articles now that are like, hey, yeah, like the remote drone operators, like fucking crazy world. But also, there's one specific video I remember. I worked at Facebook for 2 years, and at one point, there was a video from the Middle East. All the details don't matter, but basically, it was a propaganda video where allegedly they captured a foreign pilot, and the video was very graphic. They basically filmed the killing and burning of this pilot. It was done in a super like cinematic way. There was music, there was all this shit. And when it got on the Facebook platform, it was just replicate. And it was almost like the equivalent of a bot farm, but it is all over the platform. So Facebook, this wasn't the first time they dealt with this stuff, right? They're like trying to say, hey, this violates all of our community guidelines, like all this type of stuff. They're trying to get it off the platform because it was the type of video where like, I went to Iraq, I've seen plenty of crazy stuff, whatever. Like, I was like, dude, this graphic ass video, right? Like this is one of those videos that like, if your parent,
the guy was getting killed while he was alive. Like they were like, what were they like decapitating him or something?
It was like in a desert. They like had him in a cage and they like doused him and they lit on fire and like it was like bad, right?
Yeah.
And so
people were replicating this video.
It looked like to some degree, and again, I understood it because I talked to somebody who was like working on it, but it looked like almost you take a video and you upload it, but if you expect that they're going to try to take it down, then you have like 50 pages or 100 pages and you post it to a bunch of them or whatever. And like they were almost, it seemed like doing it in like an automated fashion.
Got it.
And so it was like a whack-a-mole game.
Got
right?
It.
And so I remember thinking to myself like, dude, there's somebody who like, somebody flagged it, they reviewed it, whatever. Recently it's come out, well, there's like content moderation teams and they sit all day long and they review content. Well, if it's flagged for like violence, it's like people shooting people, stabbings, like all this stuff. You just sit and watch that all day. Yeah, you're gonna be fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. It makes a lot of sense, huh?
Right? Like imagine if you just watched like gruesome things that that platforms decide shouldn't be on the platform. And your job is to just sit there and be like, nope, that's good. This is not good. Nope, that's good. This is not good. Crazy.
Fuck, that's a crazy thing I never even thought about. Wow, man. Well, Twitter allows a lot of that shit, don't they? So Twitter, I just saw a video on Twitter like a week ago of this dude getting in a fist fight. And then this guy just pulls out a knife, hits him in the neck. And then he's standing there and you just see blood shooting out of his neck and then he collapses.
You should go back and see if it's still there. I don't know if you know like what account or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I always wonder when I see videos, you know, like that, is it just because like they haven't caught it yet and nobody's like reported it and then once it gets reported, it gets taken down?
That guy, Andy No, he posted it. He reposted it. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah. The guy, he was like, what, in the Portland protest or something?
Yeah. I think he got his ass kicked or something by a bunch of Antifa people or something.
I think that I think that might have happened more than once and now like he kept going back. Yeah, but like that content is just kind of crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. It makes you think a lot about the content that gets uploaded.
Yeah, well, it's. I mean, going back to what you're talking about companies like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, it's like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube are essentially worse than they are because they're like the monopoly that controls all of the fucking media distributors. Like they're not just the corporation that provides the journalism. They're the corporation that distributes the corporations that provide the journalism. So when you're fucking dealing with like they're just dealing with their policies or trying to make shit conform to their policies. But when you start to talk about like them censoring stuff based on ideology, you kind of get crazy. Like it sounds good, and I want to like everyone talks about it, but it's hard for me to fathom that they really are taking shit down.
I don't think, again, on a global basis, I don't think that the platforms generally are like all content from one political party is good or bad. I find, like, with you, I'm like, that's hard for me to believe. I've been inside of one of the companies.
Right. You worked with Snapchat too, right?
Yeah, for a little while. And when you like look at it, it's like at Facebook, there was definitely like a single piece of content would get shared. Somebody like, hey, what is this or whatever. But at least from what I saw in 2014, 2015, it was never like all good, all bad, this political party, that political party. But then you look at, like, take Twitter. I never worked at Twitter, but the Hunter Biden laptop story.
Yeah.
Like that, again, local decision, we'll call it local, even though it had a global impact, local decision in terms of this one piece of content, are we going to allow it? And it wasn't like...
he said the FBI told him not to. Zuckerberg just said the FBI is the one that they tipped him off.
Like warned him or something, right? Yeah. It's like, and I think what he said to Rogan was that they like suppressed the distribution but didn't completely block it, which again, like...
Sure.
It just gets into this whole game of like, I always try to put myself in their shoes. What should they have done? Right? And like, it's a complicated fucking world, because guess what? If it had been not the true story or whatever, like basically what they were warned of, then all of a sudden, if you just let everything fly, you know, it's like this weird world.
Yes, totally. Yeah, you understand.
So it's kind of like lose to some degree.
Right.
But with the Twitter thing, I remember people were like sharing screenshots, like, I can't DM this privately to my friend.
Right. You can't even DM shit. Fuck.
And that's when I was like, all right, like this is kind of crazy stuff. I mean, it was a New York Post article. It wasn't like, from what I remember, the thing that was being blocked wasn't like, Danny's wild conspiracy theory.com, right? It was like one of the longest standing media outlets in the country.
Right.
And again, sure, some people don't think that they do, real work or whatever, but like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that and all the vaccine shit, like that specifically, that's easy to figure out the motives behind that. It's all money. It's like the pharmaceutical industry pushing their vaccines. Like they don't want anybody talking negatively about vaccines.
We posted a video recently and we had a guest on, and he was talking about how we're essentially moving from an American-dominated kind of global world order to this like multipolar world. Now, multipolar world just means that like there'll be like the American view of the world. There might be like a Russia-China view of the world. And maybe there's even like a, I don't know, whatever other views of the world. But like we're going to have multiple views of the world. It won't be so much globalization. It'll be more like nationalism. And this is something that they're talking about on every media outlet. We have politicians talking about it. We have economists talking about it. Like this is a question right now. Are we going to continue with globalization, or are we going to pull back from that a little bit due to geopolitical conflict, supply chain disruptions, like all these different things? So this guy was talking about the New World Order like falling. So he was saying like, hey, like this thing that people have talked about is like not going to be a thing in the future. We're going to go back to like an American-centric view of the world and then other places. Okay. And we titled the video something like, is the New World Order, is the world order falling? Right? And YouTube put like a warning or like I think it was a context panel to a Wikipedia article. And it was like, New World Order. This is a conspiracy theory by people, blah, 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 whatever. And I was like, man, like, sure, maybe there's like an extreme version of it. But like the way that he was using it was not like there's 5 people who run the world. He was using it as just like the way the world has been is not going to be the same way moving forward. Right. And that was the first time I said to myself, I was like, oh, they're probably using like AI or something. They just see a phrase and they immediately put the thing. That's not human reviewed.
It can't be, right?
No, because if you watch the video, you'd be like, oh, these guys are just, he used a poor choice of words at worst, right? But again, you're doing this for billions of videos. Like, what are you going to have, 100 million people to sit there and watch a couple of videos every day? Like,
right.
You can't do that.
Yeah, the whole like view of, I wonder if when it will change, when humans will evolve into not thinking like Russians, Americans, Chinese, you know, in like
You think
like
we'll ever do that?
when the tribal mentality of humans will, if we'll get wiped out before that happens, but I wonder what it would take for us to evolve into something, just thinking of like everybody as just humans.
You need catastrophe, unfortunately.
You need catastrophe. Yeah, you probably do, right?
Think about it.
Or aliens.
Republicans, Democrats, like all of a sudden those lines kind of blur and everyone's just like un-American when there's like an external threat to America.
Right.
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 And sure, there's some idiots that try to politicize things, whatever. But like for the most part, okay, 9/11 was a good example. Like, everyone was like, fucking America. And then like you see like Europe comes together when the Russia-Ukraine stuff happens. Right. So like there's this almost like external risk or catastrophe, it seems. Aliens would be like a fucking global humans first, whatever's coming.
Yeah, because politicians, political parties and governments would lose their power. They would lose the allegiance of their people. They would lose Democrats and Republicans, and we would just have earthlings.
Do you think that aliens are real?
Yeah, of course. I don't know. I think they're real. I don't not think they're real. I for sure think that, I mean, just from the people that I've talked to that.
So let's say that they exist. I think the more important question is, will we interact or discover them during our lifetime?
I think they exist, but the thing I don't know is what are they?
Okay, explain.
Or like where they came from, I think is the question. I think something exists, whether it's time travelers or something from another planet or some sort of civilization living under the ocean. There's gotta be, I want to know who's responsible for those UFO videos. Like somebody advanced is responsible for that. I don't know if it's the US, Russian, or Chinese government. I think it's too advanced.
The Tic Tac thing is
someone
wild.
else has got to be responsible for that. I don't think it's humans.
The Tic Tac thing is the one, was it Bob Lazard? Right, you know who this guy is? He's the one who worked at Area 51 or whatever, and he was like, "Oh yeah, there was like disc-looking spaceships." You're like, "All right, that was like 40 years ago."
Yeah, he described traditional flying saucers.
Yeah, and so like, all right, you see the Tic Tac thing, and it's just, again, I'm not a what is it, like expulsion engineer or whatever, right?
Propulsion,
yeah, propulsion engineer. See, I told you I was stupid. When you think of it, it's like, dude, I never seen anything do that before. Like, I don't know if you saw a video recently on Twitter, and they have like a screenshot. It's this thing that like appears to be like flying down the sidewalk, like fast. And it's got like a little light.
I haven't seen that.
And there's a screenshot of it. And of course, like the way the screenshot is, it just looks like fucking crazy thing, right? And I kept thinking to myself, I was like, that could be like a bullet. Right, that just like the way that the air kind of behind the bullet or something, that could be something else. Like I have no clue. Yeah, but like I don't trust any videos I see anymore.
No, I don't trust any videos I see. Especially when it's on TV. Even if it's not like social media, you see something on social media and it's probably bullshit, right? If you see something like a UFO that somebody just posts, but if it's on TV, you can almost guarantee it's bullshit. Because there's so many like shows like Ancient Aliens, all those History Channel shows, they just over dramatize all that shit so much.
You ever talk to one of those guys? No. I had an Ancient Alien researcher.
Oh, really?
Podcast like 2 years ago. Bruce Fenton, I think is his name. And he had me until like the very end. And he's like walking through like the dinosaurs, like all this stuff and all these theories or whatever. And then he was like at the very end, he's like, and by the way, they're ancient aliens. And I was like, you lost me on that part, but like, well, there's like theory behind up until some point.
Well, here's there's evidence. Like there is evidence of super advanced technology back in the days of like the Egyptian times. Like if you actually dissect the timeline, there's this dude who has a fascinating YouTube channel. His channel's called Uncharted X.
Okay.
And he's been to Egypt and Mesopotamia and I forget the other places that he's been to, but he studies like the ancient ruins. He studies like the pyramids and all the different ruins in Egypt and other areas around the world. And he focuses down on like specific engineering that was used. So one of the best examples to me is the core drilling. So there's like this basalt rock that is used for the like those stones that you see on the pyramids. Super, super hard fucking rock. I'm gonna sound like an idiot the way I describe this because I don't know the specific details. But he looks at these giant pieces of fucking stone, like big, like twice as big as this entire table of basalt. And there's clearly like a giant circular, perfectly symmetrical blade that is cut into them. In some of them, they're giant. And these rocks are so hard that some of our most advanced machines today that cut granite countertops could not even cut them, especially on that scale.
Interesting.
On top of that, there's these cores that are drilled in these rocks, these perfectly cylindrical cores that are drilled out of these rocks that this technology we didn't even have in the 80s or the 90s. And this supposedly happened in the times of ancient Egypt. So like he takes the evidence and then there's pottery. And there's some pottery that is like, have you ever seen a piece of clay that's molded like on a clay wheel? Like people they throw it on the wheel and they make this perfectly symmetrical piece of clay pottery. It's basically identical to a piece of clay pottery in symmetry and smoothness, but it's the hardest rocks that exist on Earth. That if you gave it to anybody today with the most advanced technology, they would not be able to replicate that out of that stone.
That's crazy.
Unless some people argue that maybe they melted it, kind of like how we form concrete with like wet concrete and then we form it perfectly. But the science behind it is they couldn't have made that molten and formed that. They couldn't have done that. So he goes deep into this shit, and the only explanation is that there was some sort of super advanced civilization that existed before the Egyptians, that the Egyptians basically took it from them and repurposed it.
Can you imagine if at some point in the future it was like, hey, the aliens aren't coming, they were already here?
Yeah.
Like we're actually the dumb version of the people to inhabit Earth?
Yeah, so that's probably the most logical thing. Is what happened was there was a super advanced civilization that existed back then. Cataclysms came. Obviously, there's like in ancient texts, the Bible, all of the ancient texts from around the globe, there's depictions of cataclysms, of fire in the sky, of massive floods. And this is all you could interpret it as asteroids or comets hitting the Earth and melting the ice caps and like making the world flood. And this could easily wipe out a large percent of the population. Now, if there was some sort of advanced civilization and they figured out how to survive and or escape the planet somehow, that's one of the theories. That's a crazy, there's no evidence that happened, but if you look at some of the technology that this guy, Ben, from Uncharted X has discovered, there's been virtually zero explanations for what he's discovered.
Yeah.
There's no modern technology that could do what has been done to those stones back then, even today.
I don't have the answers, but I love this shit.
Yeah, I love it too.
Right? Because it just feels like almost like a detective trying to like figure it out.
It's fascinating just to think about that kind of shit really lights my fucking mind up because it's something that it's just one of those things. I think it's something that's ingrained deep in our primitive brains that we just want to, we're just naturally interested in that shit because it's like, where did we come from? What are we missing from this whole thing?
I agree. Where can we send people to find your podcast?
On YouTube, Koncrete, spelled Koncrete. That's the main place people watch it. Actually, Spotify has been, our Spotify audience has been growing tremendously too. So we actually have more people who watch our episode on Spotify, weirdly enough, than we have on YouTube.
Really?
Yeah. So if you just search Koncrete podcast on Spotify, it's on iTunes too, but the audio side has been growing tremendously.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Why'd you use a K for concrete?
Because I had so before I started doing YouTube, I had a advertising agency and I got a cease and desist from a company in California who had the same name, and it was just me and my friend at that time. So we didn't have money to to fight a lawsuit. So we just changed the name. And a buddy of mine who was actually in the real concrete industry, he said, hey man, there's this cool domain name we almost bought for our company, but it's just spelled concrete with a K.com. This was like in 2011 or something. And like, even back then, a .com was rare to have a one word .com. And I thought it looked sick, just concrete with a K. So I bought it for like $5,000 and that's it. That's
awesome.
There's no like deep explanation for it. It's just, it was available and it looked cool online. It looked cool.
There's no better
The word looks cool. Koncrete.
There's no better reason to do it than that. Yeah. And it's not hard to like when you see it, you know what it is, right? It's not like, what are all those like it's concrete.
Yeah. People misspell it all the time, which probably is not good for like discovering it on the internet, but whatever.
I enjoyed talking. I'm excited to talk more.
Hell yeah, man. I hope you're going to come on my podcast because I think that'll be a good one. I want to talk about like crypto and all that shit with you.
Let's do it.
Cool.
All right.